You're not born a great thinker. You don't even become one over time. You build the paths the true master of critical thinking walks, and then you practice walking those paths, studying the territory step by step. But before you start building those roads into the unknown, embracing the unknown as every lifelong learner eventually does, it's helpful to take a cue from Abraham Lincoln, who said, "Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I will spend the first 4 sharpening the axe." Problem is, it's hard to know how to sharpen the axe of the mind so that the roads you're building and are walking are worth the trials and the tribulations of the unknown, which can cause so much fear. That unknown can. It can cause anxiety and even giving up before you get started. Well, one way to sharpen the axe of the mind is to sharpen what goes on in your mind, which is what we call thinking. Now, normally we think of critical thinking as if it were all kinds of thinking that is sharp, like an axe. But critical thinking is just one foundational way of connecting knowledge across domains and thinking clearly about the domains and the connections. So we're going to talk today about critical thinking, but it is just one kind of thinking, and we're going further into what I call polymathic thinking. Now, poly means many, and mathenine is for learning. And in case you're new to that term, polymath really just means someone who gets good at multiple skills or has broad topic expertise, but broad with substance and depth. Not a genius necessarily, just a curious person who keeps connecting dots across the fields, always specifically with substance and depth, which quite frankly is where all the satisfaction is. This is not just my opinion as someone of varied learning and varied skills. It's been written about in glorious detail in many books, and 2 of them happen to have the polymath in the title. And I'm really grateful that Waqas Ahmad, who wrote The Polymath, invited me to one of his events. He's an extraordinary polymath himself. And what I'm trying to get at for you here is that polymathic thinking is really just integrative thinking for integrating learning. Taking what you learn from different fields and turning scattered facts into insights you can actually use. Scattered little tidbits about how to do particular things as a skill in order to turn the skill into mastery. So what are the most powerful thinking types you should spend your hours sharpening, like Abraham Lincoln talked about? You got 6 hours to chop down a forest? What are the 4 hours you're going to spend sharpening that axe? Well, hopefully it's the ones that help you enjoy breadth and depth. And the 2 most important factors that let you connect many fields of knowledge in ways that produce insights on demand are what you should probably focus on. Not only insights, but new directions to travel that create delight in your life. Rather than live a life where you only ever master 1 or 2 areas of knowledge, always wondering what could have been, you escape the trap of being in just 1 or 2 silos so that you can see more, you can do more, and you can be more as the architect of your destiny, the builder of your dream life, the person who lives what you've known you've always wanted to experience because you took the time to sharpen the axe before you even think about swinging it. Now let's get started. Sharpen the axe. Sharpen the axe. The first type of thinking we should discuss is this broad critical thinking idea. And critical thinking is really how you separate form from content. So you stop losing good ideas just because they arrive in bad delivery. Now, my experience with critical thinking comes from having taught it as a university professor for 4 years at the 4th year level, and I'd also taken logic as a course as an undergrad in university. But specifically when teaching it, well, that's a blessing because when you teach, you learn. And so helping people through that course for quite a few years really honed my attention. And we can't talk about all of the things involved in critical thinking, but one of my favorite exercises I gave the students is the one I'm going to give you today, and it really helps you with this form-content division and making sure that you're always finding good ideas even if they're wrapped in garbage. So let me share the context where you can learn this kind of skill easily. I have the opportunity to practice sharpening my critical thinking frequently on my YouTube channel, which now has, nearly 200,000 subscribers, and thank you for being part of that. I love the comments I receive, but some people attack me, and they attack me personally instead of the ideas I'm presenting. However, sometimes in those attacks, and there's a term for it, it's ad hominem attack, to the man, and that Latin is helpful to know, so I encourage you to memorize it. But sometimes in those ad hominem attacks, the form is bad, but there is something that's good in the content. Now, that doesn't mean I don't counter these people on their ad hominem attacks. And then they often start to double down and increase their insults. And I may double down myself as well in pointing out that they're making ad hominem attacks. But I'll also take time to point out the good things that they're saying and just say, this would be so much better if you would just leave out the ad hominem attacks and fallacies by attacking. And they're missing the opportunity to sharpen their minds because of the emotions and the egos that wind up getting engaged. Well, that's form, right? And without critical thinking, we can't think about the difference between the form and the content. So the critical thinker notices the moves on the chessboard that are taking place, keeps calm, or at least as calm as possible, because I'll admit I sometimes get triggered and I can't just immediately be calm. So, you just try your best to be as calm as possible, but always think, what's the form here? What's the content? This form is really bad, but what's the good thing here? And then you get yourself to focus on the actual content instead of the form. And if you need to, point out the form. And that's what I'm doing when I have these attacks. And I just said, this is an ad hominem attack. It's a fallacy. Let's just get down to the good things that you said. And I think this criticism is great, etc. But you can just really have a much sharper mind if you'll just look at form-content divisions. And the ad hominem attack is one of them, where the form is really bad, but there's sometimes really good things in the content. So here's a 30-second drill or thereabouts to train your objectivity on demand and see form and content. Try and think of a spicy opinion you've heard this week. Or if you haven't heard one, pay attention to something controversial. And ideally something that offends you, gives you an emotional reaction, or puts you in a defensive mode. Then in one sentence, restate the core claim, the content, without emotion, and describe the form, and also without emotion. Be objective about it. This person is being angry. This person is attacking, or whatever. But divide the form from the content. And if you're already equipped with the broader set of critical thinking skills, which I plan to teach in greater detail in the future on this channel, name the argument type. But if you don't know all the arguments yet, don't worry. But for example, it could be a causal argument. It could be an analogy. It could be argument from authority, or it could be some kind of special definition or special pleading that they're doing. It could be gish galloping. I think that's a term, gish galloping. I've seen a lot of that recently. In any case, the small act of labeling alone boosts your objectivity, and the simplest way to get at it is form content. And I hope that the example of the ad hominem attack helps. Anytime that you're attacking someone personally, it can be that it's still got something good in there, but when you get attacked, well, just don't attack people personally, first of all. But if you are getting attacked, try to just think critically. What is the form? What is the content? And then after practicing this exercise, while you're watching YouTube or reading books, or the next time a colleague or a friend attacks you in an emotional way, or heaven forbid, gives you this personal kind of ad hominem attack during an argument, just try to extract the truth, ignore the emotions, but label them for what they are so that you can respond to the claim and don't fear saying, hey, this is a personal attack. I get your actual criticism, the form of it, and just say, hey, I get what you're saying in your criticism. I get the content here, but that form actually reduces your effectiveness and it's kind of clouding things. So let's pull back, be more critical. And this is how polymaths can develop their skills and ultimately remain welcome in every room. Now, he wasn't perfect, but Benjamin Franklin is a great example of this kind of thing. It's how he operated, and he wound up very, very successful in the end. He was a great critical thinker, and he was really, really able to divide form from content. And if you haven't read some of his letters or things that he wrote or read his life story, get on it. I've got a video about the big picture things, but the granular details are fantastic. And you really want to do it because this same move of dividing form from content, it can help you when you're decoding exam questions, when you're filtering online advice. Use it any place or time. Emotion obscures the big picture and the small granular details so you can separate the signal from the noise. Now, once you know how to stay calm inside the storm, the next step is learning how to take that storm apart, piece by piece. And for that, you need a kind of thinking that breaks complex ideas into parts more than just form and content. To do this, you want analytical thinking, and it's very hard to do on your own. I host conversations with memory scientists and memory athletes on the Magnetic Memory Method podcast for exactly the reason that it's hard to do proper analytical thinking on your own. Collaboration with others makes analytical thinking happen almost automatically, especially if you can use critical thinking to not get emotional about things. And the reason why analytical thinking happens through collaboration is because it multiplies viewpoints and helps expose the parts that you miss. This is why Benjamin Franklin used to hold these groups that he called the junta, and they would get together and they would help each other find the missing parts and expose the weakest links in their thinking. This is so important because no matter how good you get, you'll still make mistakes, especially if you don't take time to stop, analyze, and ideally take other viewpoints into consideration as part of the analysis process. Now, there are way too many ways to practice analytical thinking than we can cover today. So here's one simple drill for those of you who love learning and memory. It allows you to dissect any process so improvement stops feeling like guesswork or understanding stops being willy-nilly. But I want to choose a analysis technique of something that will help improve you. So pick a tool for this exercise, a tool that you use. Let's say a learning tool like spaced repetition. If you don't know what spaced repetition is, it's just the idea that you repeat information on a certain schedule using active recall to get it into long-term memory as quickly as possible. So there's a lot of detail around that, but most of you will probably know what that already is. Whatever it is, pick a tool that you use and list 3 components of that tool that you use to improve yourself. And in the case of spaced repetition, it would be scheduling, retrieval practice, and feedback. Now, for each of those pieces and parts, pick one lever that you can change today and then make the change. So, for example, if you're always scheduling your reviews the exact same way, analyze how you can optimize it. You might stop doing your review during the evenings when you're bone tired, and then start studying in the morning. And now you have a comparison to analyze. You can analyze the morning against the evening. And then if you also analyze how you use interleaving as another learning technique, for example, break it into its parts, what it is, and then you can compare its parts against itself through analysis and compare it against the other learning technique through analysis. Now, just to stick with this idea of changing your schedule for your spaced repetition review, you might not want to get up early in the morning to study. But if you don't actually ever try it to analyze your schedule and experiment with different times to do the cross-analytic thinking, you're robbing yourself of the mental sharpness that only this kind of inquiry through analysis can provide. Then you can apply this kind of thinking across multiple fields, studying the parts, the patterns, and testing them. Practice analytical thinking enough and you will see the power of breaking things down, comparing them, and then you'll see your own growth over time. Specific kinds of growth, because this is the thinking type that sharpens how you can learn languages through the analysis of language, how you can structure businesses and have better results from your projects, or even just how to analyze chess openings better. Anywhere that parts make a whole, having the axe of your mind sharpened is going to make analytical thinking better and better and better for you. And this is the key. Now, speaking of growth, if you're new here, smash that subscribe button and join our mission to help everyone around the world think sharper, remember more, and lead better lives. The more we all improve as individuals, the more everything gets better for everyone and for the love of everyone who loves learning. Smash that thumbs up so the robots never forget that we humans still love using our minds as we keep helping the robots develop theirs. Which leads us to our next type of thinking, which is abstract thinking. And I don't know about you, but playing around with all these robots is mighty abstract indeed, isn't it? Oh, the AI, the AI, the AI. Well, abstract thinking is itself kind of abstract, and I prefer to dive into the deep end first, so bear with me. I'm talking about how symbols, models, and principles work. For example, there's no natural reason why the letter A should sound like A, and yet it does in English, and sometimes it also sounds like ah. Well, A is a symbol, and it's abstracted from its sound. But using abstract thinking gives us the ability to jump from the visual example of the letter A to the rules of how it sounds, how it can sound, and how it also can't sound, and then back again to how it appears. And we can do all that without knowing the history of how and why the sound A is connected to the symbol A, and how the A may be built off the pattern of a cow's head upside down, and all these sorts of things. We can parse that just beautifully. And then that ability that we have, that we learn automatically or through years of study as kids, we can then apply it all over the world. Anatole Rappaport put it in the following way. And look, I know it can be a little bit difficult to wrap your head around what he's saying. It took me a while, that's for sure. But it's quite useful. He said that abstracting is a mechanism by which an infinite variety of experiences can be mapped on short noises or words. Now, this sentence reminds me of Galileo, who apparently said that the alphabet is humanity's finest invention because we can produce infinite sentences from just a handful of letters. The question is, how can this kind of thinking about thinking in an abstract way be useful to you? Because I know what I just said sounds like a lot of psychobabble. Well, in the next half minute, you're going to turn a frustrating task into fuel by changing how you frame it in your mind through abstract thinking. This very quick drill is particularly fine-tuned for the polymathic learner. So, take a task that you resist, maybe even one you despise, like analyzing your schedule and changing the way that you plan your study sessions. And then use analytical thinking to see the various parts of the task. And then finally, come up with a mantra that helps you correct your attitude every time you resist in an abstract way. For example, a while ago I shared with you just part of a set of personal mantras I've developed for the work that I do. And one thing that frustrates me but is absolutely necessary is looking at internet analytics. So rather than carrying on getting frustrated, knowing that giving up is itself a path to frustration, I looked at all those numbers and labeled all the parts of the task, and then I actually came up with two mantras, and they're a little bit abstract, but one of them is numbers on a screen, which is my way of saying you're getting upset over nothing more than numbers on a screen. Rather than see them objectively, I was getting really personal, emotional. Why isn't it this way? Why isn't it that way? But by abstracting myself from them, I could see them better, and I could see that I was taking it the wrong way. So I know that that sounds abstract, but that's the point, because ab means to take away from, right? And so I'm abstracting myself away from it. And the mantra helped. Numbers on a screen. Now, the second mantra was, it's just a game. And these mantras may not work for you. They might not even make sense to you. But it is abstract thinking. So again, take something that bothers you, analyze it, figure out what its parts are, and then figure out some kind of mantra that works for you to just be able to see it in a completely different way. So whatever it is, that task that bothers you where you feel resistance, write the steps down, which will take analytic thinking to do, and then try to figure out a mantra. This could be a lifesaver for you, especially if you're a person who wants to accomplish big dreams. Sharpen the axe. Sharpen the axe. Next up, concrete thinking. Now, concrete thinking involves evidence, examples, and verification. Now, it's tempting to avoid concrete thinking because in our fast-paced world where so many people chase speed and convenience instead of thoroughness, concrete thinking can make you seem stubborn to other people. Resist the temptation to gather concrete evidence and examples so you can think concretely about them. And without evidence and examples, you can't think concretely. Now, what on earth does it really mean to think concretely once you've gathered the evidence? Well, at the risk of repetition, I hope I'm getting clear here. You're not thinking concretely unless you stop to think, do I have any concrete examples? So rather than go on through a bunch of possible examples of concrete thinking, just do this drill. Pick something you're skeptical about. Let's say you've heard me talk about memory techniques, but you don't believe it's possible for you to enjoy the high standard of recall I know it's possible for you to enjoy if you're willing to put in the work. Instead of sitting around and doubting yourself 1 second longer, get out there and find a couple of empirical examples that would satisfy a person more skeptical than you, and one that would falsify your own position. And then start to ask concretizing questions. So the way that we get more concrete is not just through gathering evidence and examples, but questioning them. Who is this that has accomplished this with their memory? What precisely did they do? When did they do it? Where did they do it? Why were they doing it? These kinds of questions are validating the claims that other people make, but they're also helping you validate yourself. Because maybe you're not skeptical. Maybe you're afraid. Maybe you know that you don't want to spend that time. Or maybe you're afraid that you're going to come out on the other end and have more responsibility because you're like, wow, that person there, they built this skill and they use it. And that looks like a lot of hard work the way that they're using it, you know? So concretizing things helps you really understand a territory and how actors in that field of the territory move. And you realize more and more and more about what the real deal is. Genji Genbutsu, as the Japanese say, go to the real place and do the real thing. It's the ultimate way to practice concrete thinking. And you start the process of concrete thinking by asking yourself, did I go to the real place? Did I do the real thing? Or did I go and do the real research? Did I do the real finding of examples and then the questioning of it all? Now, coming back to becoming a master of multiple fields as a polymath. Polymaths are really good at concrete thinking and then that process of questioning and finding the examples. Leonardo da Vinci was amazing at this. He was always concretizing. He wrote in his journals, go talk to that guy about my idea. He's validating, making it concrete. And it starts with knowing that you need to do that. Knowing that you need to do that or remembering that you need to do that is where concrete thinking starts. And polymaths, they don't float on false promises and fairy tales. They land the plane because they know all its parts. They know how to fly. They know how gravity works, along with all the details involved in understanding runways and runways that they may be encountering for the first time. And the shared principle across all these types of thinking is something I call constraint-based fluency. But we're almost out of time, so we're going to bookmark the role of constraint-based thinking for another day, and I'll leave it to you to make sure you're subscribed to this channel, you have your notifications set, and you're ready for when that training drops. Before I share one last major tip, let me invite you to claim my polymathic thinking map at magneticmarionmethod.com/PTM. It gives you 6 more thinking types and will help you identify the weakest links in your thinking right now so you can avoid the problems that those of us who work seriously on the quality of our minds regularly encounter. And you'll still encounter them, I'm sorry, but you'll have better strategies for dealing with them when you encounter them. Now you might be thinking, what kind of problems are you talking about? Well, for example, if you're a natural idea generator, you probably need more concrete thinking so that you can actually complete and capitalize on your ideas. Because that sucks, right? I'm filled with all kinds of ideas, but I never finish any of them. In fact, I barely ever start in any of them because I'm a multi-potentialite. I have so much potential, but every time I get started on a project, a new idea comes in. Well, we can help you fix that, and it would be a pleasure to do so. So the link for the polymathic thinking map is on the screen and in the description below, or at magneticmarionmethod.com/PTM for polymathic thinking map. With thanks to everyone who follows the Magnetic Memory Method project, here's one of the things that has helped me the most over the years, and reading about Lincoln lately has reminded me of it in a big way. Reading more books is not necessarily thinking. Neither is creating more mind maps or memorizing more information in more memory palaces. Those are methods. And believe me, I love methods. That's why I call my work the Magnetic Memory Method. I offer you the methods by which you can build your systems for using memory techniques clearly, crisply, and in a way that gets results. But loving methods can be a pitfall. Thinking is the force and the fuel that gives meaning to the methods you use. And if this insight I just laid out already starts making you feel inspired and more powerful, that's the point. Breadth without analysis and synthesis is noise. Depth without concretization is a dead end. Polymaths win because they can switch methods cleanly, connect disciplines quickly, and ship results consistently. Get the polymathic thinking map for more help. And if you'd like more thinking training immediately, also stick around and watch my video, 7 critical thinking examples that will bulletproof your mind. Next, it covers real-life scenarios demonstrating how successful individuals apply these skills that we talked about today and more. You'll learn about how to analyze data, redefine problems, and even leverage human psychology, and to make better decisions, not just more often, but especially when making better decisions counts. Thanks again, and until we have a chance to speak again, keep yourself thinking as sharply as you possibly can, and keep yourself magnetic.